My cheating ex showed up claiming I got her pregnant and told everyone I abandoned her. Now she's paying the consequences. So, me and my girlfriend Chloe dated for about 8 months before I caught her texting her ex about meeting up while I was supposedly out of town for work. I dumped her immediately and she lost it, crying and begging for another chance. I blocked her on everything and moved on with my life. About 6 weeks later, she shows up at my apartment at midnight banging on the door screaming she's pregnant. I let her in because my neighbors were already coming out to see what was happening. She's waving this pregnancy test around saying I ruined her life and I need to take responsibility. I told her to leave and we'd get a paternity test when the baby was born if she was really pregnant. She said she didn't need a test because she hadn't been with anyone else. I reminded her about her ex and she said they never actually met up. Sure. She left, but then started telling everyone we knew that I got her pregnant and abandoned her. My mom called me crying, asking how I could do this to a girl. My friends started picking sides. Some believed me, others said I needed to man up. Chloe was posting about her pregnancy journey, morning sickness, doctor visits, all of it. She even started a baby registry at Target and sent the link to my family. My sister actually bought her a crib because she felt bad. The thing is, Chloe made some mistakes. First, she said she was 3 months pregnant, but we'd broken up 6 weeks ago and hadn't been together for 2 weeks before that because I was actually out of town for work. The math didn't work, but she kept changing her story about how far along she was. Second, she posted about having terrible morning sickness while her roommate Becca told me she was going out drinking every weekend. Pregnant women don't do shots at the club. Third, she claimed she had an ultrasound appointment and needed me to pay for it. I said I'd pay the doctor directly and come with her. She said I wasn't allowed in because we weren't together. I said fine, I'd wait in the lobby and pay at the desk. She canceled last minute saying she felt too sick. This happened 3 times. My buddy Jason worked at the medical center where she claimed to go. He couldn't tell me patient information, but he could tell me that the obstetrics unit was closed for renovation for the past 2 months. So where was she going for these appointments? I started playing along. Told Chloe I'd been thinking and maybe we should try to work things out for the baby. She was so happy she immediately started planning our future together. I said we should tell our families together at a dinner party to celebrate. She loved the idea and invited everyone, including her parents who lived 2 hours away. The dinner was at this nice restaurant downtown. Chloe shows up in this flowy dress with her hand on her stomach the whole time, even though she should barely be showing. She's talking about baby names and nursery themes. Her mom is crying happy tears about becoming a grandmother. My mom brought baby clothes as a peace offering. That's when I asked Chloe to show everyone the ultrasound pictures. She said she forgot them at home. I said that's okay, we can call the doctor's office and get copies. She said they were closed. I pointed out it was only 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. She started getting nervous and said we didn't need to do this now. I turned to everyone and said I had something to share. I told them about the closed obstetrics unit, the drinking every weekend, and the changing timeline. But the real kicker was when I said I'd had a vasectomy 2 years ago after a cancer scare. Never told Chloe because we always used protection anyway, and I was planning to reverse it when I was ready for kids. I pulled out the paperwork from my doctor confirming I'd been shooting blanks the entire time we dated. The table went completely quiet. Chloe's dad asked her directly if she was really pregnant. She started crying and said she might have been confused about some things. Her mom asked to see any proof of pregnancy at all. Chloe couldn't provide anything except that one pregnancy test, which her roommate Becca suddenly remembered Chloe buying in bulk online from some sketchy website that sold fake positive tests. Becca was at the dinner too, because Chloe had invited her for support. Becca didn't know about my vasectomy and was disgusted that Chloe had been lying to everyone, including her. Then she said something that changed everything. Becca pulled out her phone and scrolled through some screenshots. She showed everyone the order confirmation from last month, where Chloe bought 20 fake positive pregnancy tests from some website based overseas. The table got even quieter, if that was possible. Becca explained she borrowed Chloe's laptop to check her email and saw the order in the browser history. She confronted Chloe about it 2 weeks ago, and Chloe said they were for pranking someone at work. Becca didn't buy that excuse, but she didn't think Chloe would actually use them to trap someone back into a relationship. She looked at me and apologized for not saying something sooner. Chloe's dad stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. He asked Chloe if anything she told them in the past 2 months was true. His voice was shaking and his face was red. Chloe started crying even harder and kept saying she could explain everything. Her mom reached across the table and grabbed Chloe's wrist. She asked for a yes or no answer about whether Chloe was actually pregnant right now. Chloe opened her mouth, but nothing came out for a few seconds. Everyone at the table was staring at her, waiting. Chloe whispered that she wasn't pregnant and never had been. The table exploded with noise. My mom's voice cut through, asking why Chloe would do something like this. My sister stood up and demanded to know what she was supposed to do about the crib she bought. Chloe's parents just sat there looking completely destroyed. Her dad's hands were flat on the table like he needed to hold himself up. Her mom had tears running down her face, but she wasn't making any sound. Other people in the restaurant were definitely staring at us now. The restaurant manager walked over to our table looking nervous. He asked if everything was all right and if we needed anything. Chloe's dad apologized and said we were just leaving. He asked for the check in this really tired voice. Everyone started standing up and grabbing their coats and purses. The whole thing felt like it was happening in slow motion. Chloe just sat there frozen in her chair with tears and mascara running down her face. She wasn't even trying to defend herself anymore. My mom wouldn't look at her. My sister grabbed her purse and walked toward the door without saying anything to anyone. I walked out to the parking lot and the cold air hit my face. My mom came up behind me and wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. She was crying and saying she was so sorry for not believing me. She kept apologizing for the things she said on that phone call when Chloe first told everyone. She said she should have trusted me and known I wouldn't abandon someone. I hugged her back, but I felt weird about it. Part of me was relieved she finally believed me, but another part was still mad that it took all this proof for her to trust her own son. My sister walked over next, looking embarrassed. She apologized too and asked what she should do with the crib. Her face was red and she wouldn't make eye contact with me. I told her to just return it or donate it to someone who actually needs it. I said Chloe definitely doesn't deserve to keep anything people bought based on her lies. My sister nodded and said she felt stupid for believing everything without asking more questions. I told her it wasn't her fault because Chloe was really convincing with all the fake details. Across the parking lot, I could hear Chloe's dad yelling at her by their car. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard something about counseling and consequences. Chloe kept trying to walk toward me, but Becca stepped in front of her and blocked her path. Becca told her she'd done enough damage and needed to leave me alone. Chloe was still crying and trying to get around Becca. Her mom finally came over and took Chloe by the arm and guided her to their car. Chloe's dad was pacing back and forth, running his hands through his hair. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Jason texted asking if everything went okay at the dinner, because he'd been worried all evening. I typed back a quick message saying it went exactly as planned, and I'd fill him in tomorrow. I added another text, thanking him for his help with verifying the closed obstetrics unit information. He sent back a thumbs up and said he was glad the truth came out. I put my phone away and got in my car. I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The whole drive, I kept replaying the moment when Chloe finally admitted she wasn't pregnant. I thought I'd feel happy or relieved, but instead I just felt exhausted and angry. Angry that it got this far in the first place. Angry that my own family doubted me for weeks. Angry that Chloe put everyone through this whole nightmare just because she couldn't accept our breakup. My hands wouldn't stop shaking even when I pulled into my apartment parking lot. The next morning, I woke up to my phone going crazy with notifications. 17 text messages from different people who were either at the dinner or heard about what happened. Most of them were supportive now, saying they should have believed me from the start. A few messages were from people asking why I had to humiliate Chloe publicly instead of handling it privately. One message said I was cruel for exposing her lies in front of both families like that. I stared at my phone, wondering how anyone could think I was the bad guy after everything Chloe did. I deleted the messages without responding to anyone and tossed my phone on the coffee table. I spent the rest of the day watching TV without really paying attention to what was on the screen. My mind kept going back to that dinner table and the look on Chloe's face when she finally admitted the truth. Part of me felt satisfied that everyone knew I was right, but another part just felt empty and tired. Around 5 o'clock, my phone rang and I saw it was my mom calling. I picked up and she asked if she could come over to talk. I said sure and told her I'd be home. She showed up about 20 minutes later carrying a bag from the bakery down the street. She handed me the bag, and I pulled out a container of those chocolate chip cookies I used to love as a kid. We sat down at my kitchen table, and she started talking about how convincing Chloe had been with all the pregnancy details. She said Chloe showed her ultrasound appointment cards and talked about specific symptoms and cravings. She mentioned that Chloe even knew medical terms and doctor names that made everything sound so real. My mom's voice cracked and she started crying again. She kept saying she was sorry for doubting me and that she should have known better. She said she raised me and knew the kind of person I was, but she got swept up in Chloe's story. I sat there eating a cookie while she cried and apologized. I told her I understood why she believed Chloe at first, because the lies were really detailed and thought out. But what hurt me was how fast she jumped to thinking I was the kind of guy who would abandon a pregnant woman. I reminded her that she called me crying and asking how I could do that to someone without even hearing my side of things first. She nodded and wiped her eyes with a tissue. She admitted she got excited about becoming a grandmother and let that cloud her judgment about my character. She said she wanted to believe in the good news so badly that she didn't stop to question if it was actually true. She apologized again and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. I told her I forgave her, but I needed her to trust me more in the future. She promised she would and said this whole situation taught her a lesson about believing her own son over some girl she barely knew. We talked for another hour about random stuff, and she helped me clean up the kitchen before she left. The next afternoon, my sister showed up at my door holding an envelope. She came inside and sat on my couch looking uncomfortable. She pulled out a stack of cash from the envelope and tried to hand it to me. She explained that she returned the crib to the store and got all her money back. She said she felt terrible about supporting Chloe and buying something for a fake baby. I pushed the money back toward her and told her to keep it. I explained that she was just trying to be kind to someone she thought needed help, and that wasn't something to feel bad about. She insisted I take it because she said she felt stupid for not asking more questions before spending that much money. I refused again and told her to use it to buy something nice for herself or save it for something important. She finally put the money back in her purse and thanked me for not being mad at her. She said she learned to be more skeptical of people's stories and to verify things before getting emotionally invested. Later that evening, I got a message from Becca asking if we could meet for coffee. She said she wanted to apologize for not speaking up sooner about the fake pregnancy tests. I messaged back saying I could meet her tomorrow afternoon at the coffee shop near campus. I was curious about what else she might know about how Chloe planned this whole thing. The next day, I showed up at the coffee shop, and Becca was already sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She slid one toward me and said she got me a black coffee because she remembered that's what I ordered when we all hung out before. I thanked her and sat down. She immediately started talking about how she's been Chloe's roommate for 2 years and noticed her behavior getting worse over time. She said Chloe always had a manipulative streak, but it got really bad after our breakup. She told me that Chloe talked about me constantly and seemed obsessed with the idea that we were meant to be together. Becca said Chloe would spend hours looking at my social media profiles and analyzing my posts for hidden meanings. She mentioned that Chloe even made a list of places I might go and times I might be there. I felt uncomfortable hearing all this because it sounded way more intense than I realized. Becca continued explaining that Chloe had been tracking everything about my life online, even after I blocked her. She said Chloe created fake accounts to follow me and keep tabs on what I was doing. She admitted she thought it was just normal breakup behavior at first, like when someone can't let go right away. But then Chloe started driving past my apartment multiple times a week. Becca said she went with Chloe once and tried to talk her out of it, but Chloe insisted she just wanted to see if I was doing okay. Things escalated after I blocked Chloe on everything and stopped responding to her attempts to contact me. Becca said that's when Chloe started talking about ways to force me to talk to her again. She mentioned the pregnancy idea came up about a month after our breakup. I asked Becca why she finally decided to speak up at the dinner instead of staying quiet like she had been. She looked down at her coffee cup and said, watching Chloe manipulate my entire family while knowing the truth made her feel sick. She couldn't stay silent anymore when she saw my mom crying and my sister bringing baby gifts based on complete lies. She said she felt guilty for not saying something sooner, but she didn't realize how far Chloe would take the lies until that dinner. Over the next few days, word spread through our social circle about what happened at the restaurant. My phone kept buzzing with messages from people who had sided with Chloe reaching out to apologize. Some of them admitted they had doubts about her story, but didn't want to seem unsupportive of a pregnant woman. A few people said they noticed inconsistencies in her timeline, but figured she was just stressed and confused. One guy I went to college with sent me a long message explaining that he felt pressured to believe Chloe because other people in our friend group were supporting her. He said he was sorry for not standing up for me when people were talking bad about me behind my back. That Friday night, Jason and a couple other friends who stuck by me throughout this whole mess took me out for drinks to celebrate the truth coming out. We went to this bar downtown and they bought the first round. Everyone was joking around and congratulating me on exposing Chloe's lies so perfectly. It felt good to be vindicated and to have my real friends around me. But even while we were laughing and having fun, I couldn't shake this exhausted feeling. The whole situation had taken more out of me than I realized. I kept thinking about all the energy I spent gathering evidence and planning that dinner. I thought about the weeks of people judging me and my family doubting me. Even though the truth was out now, I still felt drained and angry that it had to get to this point at all. A few days later, I started noticing Chloe posting vague messages on social media about mental health struggles and people not understanding her situation. She wrote stuff about being judged unfairly and going through a difficult time. I didn't respond or engage with any of it, but several mutual friends took screenshots and sent them to me. They asked if she was trying to spin a new story and make herself look like the victim again. I told everyone to just ignore her posts and not give her any attention. I wasn't going to let her drag me back into more drama after everything that just happened. 2 days after that whole scene at the restaurant, Jason came by my apartment with a 6-pack and pizza. We sat on my couch and went through everything that happened at the dinner. He kept shaking his head while I told him about Chloe's face when I pulled out the vasectomy paperwork. He said he was glad his tip about the closed obstetrics unit helped expose her lies, but he seemed really disturbed by how elaborate the whole thing was. He pointed out that Chloe maintained those lies for months, creating fake doctor appointments and posting about morning sickness and baby registries. That level of planning wasn't just someone being desperate after a breakup. It was calculated manipulation that involved my entire family and friend group. We talked about how she must have spent hours researching pregnancy symptoms and timeline details to make her story believable. The conversation left me feeling weird because I kept wondering what else she lied about during our 8 months together. My mom called me Wednesday afternoon asking if I'd come to family dinner that weekend. She said she wanted to make things right and have everyone together without all the drama hanging over us. I hesitated on the phone because I was still processing how hurt I felt about not being believed initially. She heard the silence and her voice got quieter, saying she understood if I needed more time, but she really hoped I'd come. I finally agreed to be there Saturday at 6. After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone wondering if one dinner could actually fix the damage from the past 2 months. My sister texted me an hour later saying she was glad I agreed to come and that Mom had been crying about the whole situation for days. Saturday evening, I showed up at my parents' house and smelled my favorite meal cooking the second I walked in. Mom made her special lasagna with the garlic bread I always asked for as a kid. My sister was already there setting the table, and she immediately started talking about random stuff to fill the awkward silence. We sat down to eat and everyone was being overly polite and careful with their words. Then my sister disappeared for a minute and came back with old photo albums from when we were kids. She started flipping through pages and pointing out embarrassing pictures of me with a terrible haircut in 3rd grade. My dad made some joke about my fashion choices in middle school. Mom laughed at a picture of me covered in mud after playing in the backyard. Gradually, the tension started breaking, and we were actually laughing together about stupid memories. By the time we finished eating, it felt like maybe we could actually move past everything that happened. The conversation flowed easier, and nobody was walking on eggshells anymore. After dinner, my dad asked if I'd help him grab something from the garage. I followed him out there and he closed the door behind us. He turned to me and apologized for not defending me more strongly to my mom during the whole pregnancy drama. He admitted he believed me from the start because he knew my character, but he didn't want to cause more family conflict by pushing back against Mom's emotional reaction. He said he took the easy route by staying quiet instead of standing up for what he knew was right. His voice got rough when he said he was ashamed of himself for letting me deal with all that judgment alone. I could see he genuinely felt bad about it. I told him I appreciated the apology, but I needed him to actually speak up in the future when someone was attacking my character. I explained that his silence felt like he agreed with the accusations, even though he claimed to believe me. He nodded and said he understood, admitting he took the path of least resistance to avoid arguments with Mom. He promised he'd do better and actually defend me next time, instead of just quietly believing me while letting others tear me down. We shook hands and went back inside, and something felt lighter between us after that conversation. The following Tuesday, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was Chloe's mom on the other end. She apologized immediately for her daughter's behavior and everything Chloe put me and my family through. Then she asked if I'd be willing to talk to Chloe with a family therapist present because Chloe was struggling with what happened. I felt my jaw tighten and I firmly declined. I explained that I had no interest in being part of Chloe's healing process after what she put me through. There was silence on the line for a few seconds. I kept going and told her that her daughter needs professional help, but I'm not the person to provide support or closure for her. I said Chloe manipulated everyone for months with an elaborate lie that damaged my relationships with my own family. Chloe's mom sounded disappointed but said she understood. She apologized again for the things Chloe said about me to their extended family and for not questioning her daughter's story sooner. After we hung up, I felt relieved that I held my boundary instead of letting guilt pull me back into Chloe's mess. At work the next day, Austin from my department stopped by my desk during lunch. He mentioned he heard about my situation through mutual connections in our social circle. He asked if we could grab coffee in the break room. We sat down and he told me he went through something similar with an ex who manipulated him and his family with lies. He said the vindication feels good at first when everyone finally sees the truth, but the anger and trust issues can stick around if you don't process them properly. He suggested I might want to talk to someone professional about it before those feelings become permanent. I brushed it off initially, saying I was fine now that the truth was out. But Austin looked at me seriously and said he thought the same thing until he realized 2 years later that he was still carrying around anger and suspicion in every new relationship. Over the next few days, I started noticing Austin was right. I caught myself being more guarded in normal conversations with people. When a coworker mentioned she was taking a sick day, I immediately wondered if she was lying. When a friend canceled plans last minute, my first thought was that he was making up an excuse. I became suspicious of people's motives in ways I wasn't before Chloe's manipulation. Austin's comment about trust issues kept replaying in my mind, and I realized Chloe's lies affected me more deeply than just the immediate drama at that restaurant dinner. The manipulation changed how I viewed people's honesty in general. Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Becca. She said Chloe moved out of their shared apartment suddenly over the weekend, leaving 2 months of unpaid rent and no forwarding address. Becca asked if I knew where Chloe went because the landlord was threatening to take legal action against both of them for the missing rent. I texted back that I had no idea where Chloe was, and honestly didn't care to find out. Becca sent another message saying she should have known Chloe would bail on her responsibilities, just like she bailed on the truth. She was frustrated and stuck dealing with the financial mess Chloe left behind. I sent Becca a quick text back saying I hoped she figured things out with the landlord, but Chloe wasn't my problem anymore. She replied with a thumbs up and said she learned her lesson about trusting the wrong people. I felt bad for Becca being stuck with the rent situation, but at least she saw Chloe's true colors before things got even worse. Over the next few days, I started noticing something weird on social media. Chloe's aunt unfriended me, then her cousin, then 2 more relatives I'd met once at a family barbecue months ago. Each notification felt like a small sting, even though I knew it was coming. Her parents must have told the extended family what happened at the dinner, and some of them were picking Chloe's side despite everything. I caught myself checking my friend count more than I wanted to admit, watching it drop by 1s and 2s as Chloe's family quietly removed me from their lives. Part of me understood they were supporting their family member, but another part felt frustrated that they'd believe her version of events after she got caught in such an obvious lie. A message request popped up on my phone from someone named Kira. I almost ignored it, but then I remembered she was that mutual friend who stayed completely neutral during the whole pregnancy drama. She never picked a side, never posted anything, just quietly watched everything unfold. Her message said she needed to talk to me about something important regarding Chloe, and she felt guilty for not reaching out sooner. I stared at the message for a good 10 minutes before responding, wondering what else could possibly come out about this situation. I told her we could meet for coffee if she wanted to talk in person. She agreed immediately and suggested a place downtown the next afternoon. The whole rest of the day, I kept wondering what she knew and why she was coming forward now. Maybe she had more information about Chloe's planning, or maybe she just wanted to apologize for staying silent. Either way, I was curious enough to hear her out. Kira was already sitting at a corner table when I walked into the coffee shop. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her cup and glancing up every few seconds. I grabbed my drink and sat down across from her, and she immediately started apologizing before I could even say hello. She said she witnessed Chloe practicing her pregnancy announcement speech about 3 weeks before Chloe showed up at my apartment that night. Kira had stopped by Chloe's place to drop off some borrowed books, and she heard Chloe in her bedroom rehearsing what she'd say to me and how she'd react if I didn't believe her. Kira thought Chloe was just venting or working through her feelings about our breakup, not actually planning to fake a pregnancy and manipulate everyone we knew. She said she felt terrible for not warning me, but at the time it seemed like harmless processing of a bad breakup. I sat there trying to process what she was telling me. Chloe had practiced the whole thing like it was a performance, rehearsing her lines and planning her reactions weeks in advance. I asked Kira what else she knew about Chloe's behavior after our breakup. She took a long sip of her coffee and said Chloe told different stories to different people about why we broke up. To some friends, I was the cheater who got caught. To others, I was emotionally distant and refused to commit. To her family, I apparently had anger issues and made her feel unsafe. Kira said she started noticing the contradictions when people would mention details that didn't match up with what Chloe had told her directly. She began distancing herself from Chloe after realizing how many versions of the story existed, but she didn't think Chloe would take things as far as faking a pregnancy. Kira apologized again for not connecting the dots sooner or speaking up when she should have. She said she kept telling herself it wasn't her business and she didn't want to get involved in drama, but watching the dinner situation unfold made her realize her silence let Chloe hurt a lot of people. I told her I appreciated her coming forward now, even if it was after everything already exploded. At least I knew the manipulation went even deeper than I thought. That evening, my mom called and asked how I was doing emotionally with everything that had happened. I hesitated before answering because I didn't want to seem weak or like I couldn't handle it. But then I admitted I was struggling with anger more than I expected. I told her I felt stupid for ever dating Chloe, for not seeing the manipulation sooner, for letting it get to the point where my own family doubted me. My mom was quiet for a moment, then suggested I might want to talk to someone professional about processing the manipulation and betrayal. She said what Chloe did wasn't normal breakup behavior, and carrying around that kind of anger and self-blame could mess me up for future relationships. I bristled at the suggestion initially, feeling like therapy was admitting I couldn't handle my own problems. But my mom gently pointed out that recognizing when you need help is actually the strong choice, not the weak one. Over the next week, I kept thinking about what my mom said. I wanted to feel like I should be celebrating the truth coming out instead of dwelling on negative feelings. Everyone knew Chloe lied now. My family believed me again, and I was vindicated. So why did I still feel so angry all the time? I noticed myself snapping at coworkers over tiny mistakes that normally wouldn't bother me. When my buddy from the gym canceled plans last minute, I immediately assumed he was lying about being sick. A cashier gave me the wrong change, and I got way more upset than the situation deserved. The anger kept bubbling up at random times, triggered by small things that reminded me of being lied to or manipulated. I started realizing my mom might be right about needing to talk to someone before these feelings became permanent parts of my personality. I finally searched online for therapists who specialized in relationship manipulation and emotional abuse. It took me 3 days to actually call and schedule an appointment, because part of me still felt like I should be able to handle this on my own. The receptionist was friendly and got me scheduled for the following week. When the day came, I sat in the waiting room feeling awkward and wondering if I was overreacting to the whole situation. The therapist called me back to her office, and we spent the first session going through the timeline of everything that happened with Chloe. She asked detailed questions about our relationship before the breakup, the fake pregnancy claims, and how I felt when the truth came out at the dinner. Talking through it all in order helped me see patterns I'd missed while living through it. The therapist pointed out specific moments where Chloe used guilt and manipulation tactics that I dismissed as normal relationship stuff at the time. During our second session, the therapist said something that really stuck with me. She explained that Chloe's fake pregnancy wasn't just one isolated crazy incident, but actually the culmination of manipulative behaviors that probably existed throughout our entire relationship. She asked me to think back to other times when Chloe might have distorted reality or made me question my own judgment. Suddenly, I started remembering smaller instances I'd completely forgotten about. Like when Chloe insisted I'd promised to take her to some concert, and I had no memory of it, but she was so convinced that I started doubting myself and bought the tickets anyway. Or when she'd get upset about things I supposedly said during arguments, except her version of my words was way harsher than what I actually remembered saying. There were times she'd tell me her friends said something about me, but when I asked those friends directly, they had no idea what she was talking about. I'd always dismissed these moments as simple miscommunications or different perspectives, but now I saw them as part of a bigger pattern of reality distortion. Jason texted me one afternoon saying he ran into Chloe at a store across town. My stomach dropped when I saw the message. He said she tried to approach him and start a conversation about me, but he shut it down immediately and told her to leave me alone. Apparently, she asked him to pass along a message that she was sorry and wanted to explain herself properly if I'd give her a chance. Jason said he told her none of our friend group wanted to be intermediaries for her drama, and she needed to move on. I felt grateful for Jason backing me up, but also annoyed that Chloe was still trying to reach me through other people after everything that happened. I called Jason that evening and told him I had zero interest in hearing Chloe's explanations or apologies. Whatever she wanted to say, I didn't need to hear it. I asked him to completely ignore her if she approached him again and make it clear I wanted no contact whatsoever. Jason agreed without hesitation and said he'd already made it clear to her that our entire friend group was done with her manipulation. He mentioned a few other people from our circle had similar encounters with Chloe, trying to use them as messengers, and everyone was shutting her down the same way. It felt good knowing my friends had my back and weren't falling for whatever new story Chloe was trying to spin about wanting closure or making amends. A couple days later, my sister stopped by my apartment with takeout from the Chinese place we both like. She looked tired when I opened the door, and I could tell something was bothering her before she even said anything. We sat down at my kitchen table, and she picked at her lo mein for a minute, before finally telling me she ran into Chloe's mom at the grocery store yesterday. My stomach dropped hearing Chloe's name again after weeks of not thinking about her. My sister explained that Chloe's mom spotted her in the produce section and came over to talk. She said Chloe's mom looked really sad and kept trying to explain that Chloe was getting professional help now and working through her issues. My sister said she just nodded politely and tried to end the conversation quickly because it felt super awkward standing there with a cart full of groceries while Chloe's mom basically apologized for her daughter's behavior. She told me she felt bad about how defeated Chloe's mom looked, like she'd aged 10 years since the dinner. I put down my chopsticks and looked at my sister directly. I told her that feeling bad for Chloe's mom was a normal human reaction, but we couldn't let sympathy pull us back into Chloe's world. What Chloe did wasn't some impulsive mistake or bad decision made in a moment of weakness. She planned and executed an elaborate manipulation campaign that lasted months and dragged our entire family through hell. She bought fake pregnancy tests in bulk, created fake doctor appointments, posted fake updates about her pregnancy journey, and weaponized everyone's emotions to try to trap me. I reminded my sister that Chloe's family pain didn't erase the damage she caused to our family. My sister nodded slowly and said she knew I was right. She just couldn't help feeling sorry for Chloe's mom, who seemed genuinely heartbroken about the whole situation. 3 months passed since the restaurant dinner where everything came out. I was sitting in my therapist's office for what felt like the 100th time, and she asked me how I was feeling about the whole Chloe situation now that some time had passed. I told her honestly that I was in a much better headspace than I'd been right after the dinner. The anger was still there sometimes, bubbling up when I thought about specific moments of her manipulation or remembered how my own mom initially didn't believe me. But the anger didn't control my thoughts anymore like it did those first few weeks. I could go entire days without thinking about Chloe or the fake pregnancy or any of it. My therapist smiled and said that was real progress, and she asked what I thought made the difference. I explained that therapy helped me understand the manipulation patterns and recognized that Chloe's behavior said everything about her and nothing about me. Time helped too, just putting distance between me and the worst of the drama. My friends stopped asking about it constantly. My family stopped walking on eggshells around me, and normal life started feeling normal again, instead of like I was constantly waiting for the next Chloe bomb to drop. My mom called me that afternoon asking if I wanted to come over for dinner that weekend. When I showed up Saturday evening, she had made my favorite pot roast with all the sides I liked growing up. We sat at her kitchen table eating and talking about random stuff like my job and her garden and my dad's new golf obsession. It felt easy and comfortable in a way it hadn't felt in months. After dinner, my mom brought it up while we were doing dishes together. She said she wanted me to know how much our relationship meant to her and how grateful she was that we'd worked through everything. I rinsed a plate and told her I felt the same way. She explained that the whole situation with Chloe taught her some hard lessons about trust and communication. She said she realized she jumped to conclusions and believed the worst about me without even asking for my perspective first. Now she makes a point to ask me directly about situations before forming opinions or getting emotional. I appreciated hearing that from her because it showed she actually learned something instead of just apologizing and moving on. Our relationship felt stronger than before because we'd had those honest conversations about where things went wrong and how to do better. She asked me questions now instead of making assumptions, and I felt like she actually trusted me as an adult, instead of still seeing me as her kid who might screw up. The following week, my sister and I met up for coffee at the place near her apartment. We were laughing about something stupid our dad did at the last family dinner when she brought up the crib incident. She made a joke about it, saying she should have known something was off when Chloe kept changing her pregnancy timeline, but she was too busy being a sucker for a sob story. I laughed and told her she wasn't a sucker. She was just being kind to someone she thought needed help. My sister said the whole experience taught her to be more skeptical and actually verify things before getting emotionally invested and buying expensive baby furniture. She told me she applies that lesson to other areas of her life now too, like when friends come to her with dramatic stories or people at work try to manipulate situations. I realized as we sat there joking about something that caused so much stress just months ago that we'd really healed from the drama. The fact that we could laugh about the crib showed how far we'd come from those awful weeks when our family was divided and everyone was angry or hurt or confused. Austin from work invited a bunch of us to happy hour at this bar downtown. I almost didn't go because I was tired from a long week, but I figured getting out would be good for me. When I got there, Austin was already at a table with a few coworkers and a woman I didn't recognize. He introduced her as his girlfriend and she seemed really nice, asking me about my job and telling funny stories about how she and Austin met. I found myself genuinely happy for them, watching them laugh together and seeing how comfortable they were with each other. There was no cynicism in my reaction, no bitter thoughts about relationships or trust or any of that. I realized later that night when I was driving home that my happiness for Austin was a sign I was moving past the trust issues Chloe created. I could see other people in relationships and feel good about it instead of immediately thinking about manipulation or lies or worst-case outcomes. My therapist had warned me that Chloe's behavior might make me paranoid or closed off to genuine connections, but sitting at that bar watching Austin with his girlfriend proved I wasn't letting Chloe's manipulation define how I viewed relationships. Becca sent me a text message out of nowhere saying she wanted to update me on her life. We met for lunch at a sandwich place halfway between our apartments. She told me she was moving to a new place with a different roommate next month because living in the apartment she'd shared with Chloe had too many bad memories attached. I understood that completely and asked how she was doing with everything. Becca said she was good, that the whole situation with Chloe taught her some valuable lessons about recognizing manipulative behavior in friendships. We talked for over an hour about random stuff, and I realized we'd become casual friends through this whole mess. We were bonded by the shared experience of dealing with Chloe's lies and manipulation. Becca knew what it felt like to be deceived by someone you trusted, and I appreciated having someone who understood that specific type of betrayal. She asked about my life and seemed genuinely interested in how I was doing, which felt nice after months of everyone treating me like a victim who needed careful handling. Before we finished lunch, Becca mentioned she hadn't heard from Chloe in months. She said Chloe stopped responding to her messages after moving out of their apartment, and Becca assumed she moved back to her parents' town a few hours away. I listened to this information and realized I didn't feel the need to know more details. I didn't care where Chloe was living or what she was doing, or whether she was getting help like her mom claimed. That complete lack of interest felt like real progress to me. For weeks after the dinner, I'd been obsessed with knowing what Chloe was telling people, or how she was spinning the story, or whether she'd try to contact me again. Now I genuinely didn't care. Chloe was part of my past, and I'd moved on to the point where updates about her life didn't trigger any emotional response. Becca seemed to understand when I told her I appreciated the update, but didn't need to know anything else about Chloe going forward. My therapist and I talked about dating during our next session. I told her I'd been thinking about getting back out there, but wasn't sure if I was ready. She asked what made me hesitant, and I explained I was worried about being too paranoid or analyzing everything for signs of manipulation. She said that being more aware of red flags was actually healthy, as long as I didn't let Chloe's behavior make me completely closed off to genuine connections. We talked through what healthy caution looked like versus unhealthy paranoia. She encouraged me to start casually dating and take things slow, paying attention to how people treated me and whether their words matched their actions. I downloaded a dating app that weekend and started swiping through profiles. It felt weird at first, but also kind of exciting to think about meeting someone new. I matched with a few people and started some conversations that seemed promising. 2 weeks later, I went on a second date with someone I'd met through the app. Her name was Sarah, and she worked in marketing for a tech company. We met at a wine bar and talked for 3 hours without any awkward silences or forced conversation. I found myself actually enjoying the experience without constantly analyzing everything she said for hidden meanings or manipulation tactics. She told me about her last relationship, and it sounded normal, no drama or crazy stories. I shared a brief version of the Chloe situation when she asked about my last relationship, and Sarah was appropriately shocked, but didn't make a big deal out of it. The conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic, and I realized I was trusting my judgment about her while still being appropriately cautious. It felt refreshing to be present in the moment instead of stuck in my head worrying about worst-case outcomes. When we said goodbye outside the wine bar, I felt hopeful about seeing her again and optimistic about my ability to have a healthy relationship, despite everything that happened with Chloe. I went to my parents' house for dinner the following weekend, and my mom had made pot roast with all the sides I liked growing up. My sister was there too with her boyfriend, and we all sat around the table like we used to before everything got crazy with Chloe. My mom passed me the potatoes and asked if I was doing okay, and I said I was good. She nodded and didn't push it, which I appreciated. Then she asked if I was seeing anyone, and the table got quiet for a second. I told her I'd been on a few dates with someone I met through an app. Nothing serious yet, but it was going well. My mom's face lit up and she started to ask more questions, but then she caught herself and just said that was nice and she was happy for me. My sister kicked me under the table and smiled, and I knew she wanted details later, but was respecting the moment. My dad didn't say much during dinner like usual, but after we finished eating, he asked me to help him with something in the garage. We walked out there and he started organizing some tools on his workbench, not really looking at me. Then he said he was proud of how I handled everything with Chloe. I stopped moving and just looked at him because my dad never said stuff like that. He said I caught the lies and exposed them without being cruel about it, and that took character. He said a lot of guys would have handled it worse, either let themselves get trapped or blown up at everyone involved. I didn't know what to say, so I just thanked him, and he nodded and went back to his tools. It was the most direct compliment he'd ever given me, and it meant more than he probably knew. A few days later, Jason texted asking if I wanted to grab lunch, so we met at this burger place near his work. We ordered and sat down, and he brought up the whole Chloe situation right away. He said he was impressed by how well I'd moved on, and asked how I was really doing with everything. I told him it wasn't easy at first, and I had to work through a lot of anger in therapy, but I was in a good place now. Jason said he could tell because I seemed more relaxed than I had in months. We talked about work and other stuff, and it felt normal again instead of every conversation being about the drama. Jason mentioned he saw Chloe's mom at the store last week, and she looked really tired and sad, and I felt a little bad, but also knew that wasn't my responsibility. He agreed and said Chloe made her choices and now everyone was dealing with the fallout. We finished lunch and headed back to our jobs, and I felt grateful to have friends who stuck by me through all of it. The next week, I stopped at a coffee shop on my way to run errands, and I ran into James, who was one of the friends who initially sided with Chloe. We made eye contact, and it was awkward for a second, but then he walked over and said hi. We had a brief conversation about nothing important, just catching up on basic stuff. Then he brought up the whole situation and apologized again for not believing me at first. He said he felt terrible about how he reacted and understood if I was still mad. I told him I understood why he was skeptical, given how convincing Chloe's performance was with all the fake doctor visits and registry and everything. He seemed relieved and said he learned a lesson about not jumping to conclusions without hearing both sides. We talked for a few more minutes and then went our separate ways, and it felt good to have that closure with him. I didn't need everyone to grovel or make a big deal out of apologizing. I just wanted people to acknowledge they were wrong and move forward. My therapist appointment was later that week, and we talked about how much progress I'd made over the past few months. She asked how I was feeling about everything, and I said I still got angry sometimes, but it didn't consume me like it used to. She said that was normal and healthy, and the fact that I could recognize the anger and process, it showed real growth. Then she brought up the idea of ending our regular weekly sessions since I'd made such significant progress. She said we could switch to monthly check-ins instead, so I'd still have support if I needed it, but I didn't require the intensive weekly work anymore. I agreed that made sense because I'd been feeling like I was running out of things to talk about in sessions. We scheduled the first monthly appointment for 4 weeks out, and I left feeling proud of myself for doing the work to get to this point. It would have been easy to stay bitter and angry, but therapy helped me process the manipulation and rebuild trust in myself and others. The woman I'd been dating for a few weeks asked me out for dinner at this Italian place downtown, and we sat in a booth near the back. We'd been taking things slow and just enjoying getting to know each other without any pressure. About halfway through dinner, she asked about my last relationship, and I knew this conversation was coming eventually. I gave her an honest but brief summary of the fake pregnancy situation, hitting the main points without going into every detail. Her eyes got wide and she said that was insane, and she couldn't believe someone would do something that manipulative. I told her it affected my approach to dating now, because I'm more cautious and pay attention to whether people's words match their actions. She said she appreciated my honesty and understood why I wanted to take things slow. We talked about how the whole experience taught me to trust my instincts and not ignore red flags just because I wanted a relationship to work. She shared some of her own past relationship stuff, and it felt good to have that level of openness with someone new. The conversation flowed naturally from there, and I realized I was genuinely excited about where things might go with her. 5 months after the dinner revelation, I woke up one morning and realized I'd gone the entire previous day without thinking about Chloe or the drama at all. I was at work dealing with a project deadline and came home to watch a movie, and it wasn't until the next morning that I noticed Chloe hadn't crossed my mind once. The situation that consumed my life for months had faded into just an unpleasant memory that didn't trigger any emotional response anymore. I mentioned this to Jason when we met up for drinks that weekend, and he said that was a sign I'd really moved on. He was right, because even when people brought up Chloe in conversation now, I felt detached from it like it happened to someone else. The anger and hurt had processed through me and left behind just facts about something that occurred in my past. My sister called me a few weeks later and said she had news she wanted to share in person. I drove over to her apartment, and she was practically bouncing with excitement when she opened the door. She told me her boyfriend proposed last night at the restaurant where they had their first date, and she showed me the ring. I hugged her and told her I was genuinely happy for her, and she started crying happy tears. We sat on her couch and she told me all about how he planned it and what he said, and I listened and asked questions and felt present in the moment. My sister said she wanted to have an engagement party in a few weeks and invite the whole family, and I said I'd be there. The celebration felt joyful and drama-free, and I appreciated that we could have family moments now without the shadow of Chloe's manipulation hanging over everything. My sister deserved this happiness, and I was glad our family could celebrate together without any tension or unresolved issues between us. The engagement party was at my parents' house with about 30 people in the backyard. My sister and her fiancé were greeting everyone and showing off the ring, and my mom was running around making sure everyone had food and drinks. I stood near the grill talking to some cousins when my mom called for everyone's attention. She gave a toast about family and trust that felt pointed but loving, talking about how challenges can make families stronger if everyone commits to honest communication. She mentioned how proud she was of both her kids and how much she valued the relationships we'd rebuilt over the past few months. Then she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said she learned important lessons about listening and believing the people you love. Everyone raised their glasses, and my sister was crying again, and I felt this warmth in my chest, knowing we'd gotten through the worst of it together. Later that night, I checked my phone and saw a message from Becca. She said she heard through mutual connections that Chloe was in therapy and working on herself, living back with her parents and trying to figure out her next steps. I read the message and realized I didn't need closure or apologies from Chloe anymore because I'd already moved on. I appreciated Becca sending the update since she knew I might wonder occasionally, but the information didn't change anything for me. I typed back a quick thanks and said I hoped Chloe got the help she needed, and I meant it. Not because I forgave her or wanted to reconnect, but because I genuinely didn't care enough to hold on to any remaining anger. My life had moved forward, and Chloe was just part of my past now. someone I used to know who made bad choices that affected a lot of people. I put my phone away and went back to enjoying the party, surrounded by family and friends who supported me through everything. A few weeks later, I was sitting at the coffee shop near my apartment when I realized I'd been seeing the same woman at the same table 3 Saturdays in a row. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and always ordered the same drink while working on her laptop. I caught myself looking over at her more than once, and the 4th Saturday when she smiled at me, I walked over and introduced myself. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, just easy conversation that felt natural, and when I left, I had her number saved in my phone. Our first date was dinner at a casual Italian place downtown, and I found myself actually relaxed instead of analyzing every word she said for hidden meanings. She asked about my last relationship on our 3rd date, and I gave her the abbreviated version about Chloe's fake pregnancy, without dwelling on all the drama. She listened without judgment and said that sounded incredibly stressful, then changed the subject to her own disaster of an ex who tried to convince her his emotional affair didn't count as cheating. We laughed about how some people will twist reality to avoid taking responsibility, and I appreciated that she understood without making it this heavy conversation. Over the next few months, we took things slow, building trust through consistent actions instead of grand gestures or intense declarations. She never pushed for more information about Chloe than I wanted to share, and she didn't treat me like I was broken or damaged goods who needed special handling. 3 months in, we were sitting in her apartment watching a movie when she paused it and asked if we were officially together or still just casually dating. I said I'd been thinking of her as my girlfriend for a few weeks now, but hadn't wanted to assume, and she smiled and said good, because she'd been telling her friends about her boyfriend and hoped that was accurate. It felt easy and right in a way my relationship with Chloe never did, built on actual honesty instead of performance and manipulation. My mom called a few weeks later and asked if I wanted to bring my girlfriend to the family barbecue at their house that weekend. I checked with my girlfriend first because I didn't want to pressure her into meeting my family too soon, but she said she'd love to come and asked what she should bring. The barbecue was casual and low-key with my parents, my sister and her fiancé, and a few cousins hanging around the backyard. My girlfriend fit in easily, talking to my mom about cooking and laughing at my dad's terrible jokes without any awkwardness. My sister pulled me aside while we were getting drinks from the cooler and said she really liked my girlfriend and thought she seemed genuine and straightforward. I watched my girlfriend helping my mom set up the dessert table and felt grateful that my family could see what I saw in her. Later that evening after we left, my mom called and said she was happy to see me with someone who seemed honest and real. She mentioned that the whole situation with Chloe taught her to pay attention to people's actions instead of just their words, and she could tell my girlfriend's kindness was authentic. I realized my family had learned from the Chloe drama too, becoming more aware of manipulation tactics and valuing genuine behavior over dramatic displays. Jason texted me the next week asking if I wanted to grab beers after work, and we met at our usual spot downtown. We caught up on regular life stuff for a while before he brought up the Chloe situation, saying he still couldn't believe how elaborate her lies were and how long she maintained them. I told him I'd moved past most of the anger thanks to therapy and time, and now it just felt like something that happened to a different version of me. Jason said he was glad his tip about the closed obstetrics unit helped expose the truth when it mattered most, and I thanked him again for being a real friend who supported me instead of taking sides based on sympathy. We raised our beers and toasted to leaving all that drama in the past where it belonged, and I meant it genuinely because I'd built a new life that didn't include any space for Chloe's chaos. Jason asked about my girlfriend, and I told him things were going great, that I'd learned to trust my instincts while staying open to new people, instead of letting one bad experience close me off completely. He said that was the healthiest attitude, and he was proud of how I'd handled everything from catching the lies to moving forward afterward. Almost 6 months had passed since the dinner revelation, and I found myself taking stock of how much had changed in that time. My relationship with my girlfriend was healthy and stable, built on actual trust instead of fear or obligation. My family bonds were stronger than they'd been in years because we'd worked through the damage Chloe caused and came out with better communication. My mom and I talked regularly without any lingering tension about her initial reaction, and my sister included my girlfriend in family group chats like she'd always been part of our circle. I'd learned to trust my instincts about people while staying open to genuine connections instead of becoming cynical or closed off. The whole experience with Chloe taught me that manipulation could be incredibly elaborate and convincing, with fake pregnancy tests and detailed doctor visit stories and months of sustained lying. But it also taught me that truth always surfaces eventually, and real relationships built on honesty will always outlast ones built on deception and control. I still felt occasional flashes of anger when I thought about how Chloe tried to trap me with a fake baby and turned my own family against me. But those moments were rare now and didn't consume me like they did right after the revelation. My therapist said that was normal healing, that the intense emotions would fade while the lessons remained. I kept living my life, working my job, spending time with my girlfriend and family and friends, moving forward instead of looking back at the chaos Chloe created.